If you've been struggling with constipation and you're finding that nothing's working despite your best efforts with diet and supplements, it's easy to feel like your body's broken or there's something wrong with you, or maybe this is just your normal and it's not fixable. But the truth is that constipation is fixable. You just have to understand and identify what is slowing down motility. And motility is essentially the term for how fast food is moving from your mouth to the toilet. In a well functioning digestive tract, that's typically about 14 to 24 hours. And if your motility is slowed down further than that, it's really a sign from your body. Essentially, it's asking you for help, and you really need to understand motility to overcome constipation. One of the ways that we can assess motility is via the Bristol Stool Form Scale, which is a visual representation of motility. So the slower the transit time, the harder and more compact your stool becomes, and the longer it takes to have a bowel movement. The longer that stool is within your large intestine, the more water is going to be extracted, and that's what makes it harder and more difficult to pass. And then the opposite of that is that the faster your motility, the more water there is. So the extreme opposite end is diarrhea. What we're working toward is an optimal type 4 bowel movement every single morning. So slow motility doesn't just impact you in kind of an uncomfortable and annoying way. Constipation actually impairs detoxification, and detoxification is critical for hormonal balance, for preventing symptoms like fatigue, acne, bloating, and even weight gain. So when you're dealing with slowed motility, you're also dealing with something that's negatively impacting your health in a pretty significant way. And what I like to use with my clients is the motility reset protocol. And what we're doing here is really more deeply understanding the physiological mechanisms that are built into every single person and taking advantage of those to trigger a bowel movement in the morning. Now, this won't work if you have an underlying root cause that hasn't been dealt with, like intestinal methanogen overgrowth or some other condition. I get more deeply into all of that in my free constipation relief guide, which you'll find linked below in the description box. But those things aside, this is well worth trying, and it would be the first step. It'd be the first step to try before you look into those other things. And so step one of this 4-step protocol that I'm going to share that I utilize with my clients is to activate your morning gastrocolic reflex. So this is a reflex that is most active in the 1 to 2 hours after you wake up in the morning. And you can trigger this reflex, which is essentially just triggering a bowel movement, by drinking something warm right away. And that could be coffee, it could be green tea, it could be hot water with lemon in it. It doesn't matter what beverage, but it does need to be hot, and it does need to be first thing in the morning. And then to further enhance that, you can eat breakfast within an hour of that. And so this combination is incredibly effective for taking advantage of a reflex that's already built in. You can further enhance this by eating a motility bowl. So essentially what you're doing with this is you're biohacking your breakfast. And I've got the recipe right here for you. So this is what I call my constipation crushing breakfast bowl. And the reason this works so well is we're using functional foods that are clinically proven to speed up motility. And the recipe is 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed. So ground flax seeds have been shown to outperform psyllium in clinical studies. And the amazing thing about this is that the longer you use the flax seeds, the greater the benefit. And it wasn't just in speeding up motility and helping with constipation. It also provided the benefit of decreased bloating and decreased abdominal discomfort, which is a wonderful combination. The kiwis reduce transit time on average of from about 54 hours to 39 hours. And they had the additional benefit of improving something called anorectal sensation. So that is essentially the signal from your body that it's time to have bowel movement. And that's critically important. You can override that signal. And if you ignore that signal, you're going to induce worse constipation, or you can actually cause constipation by ignoring that signal. Red dragon fruit reduced transit time on average by about 5 hours, and it also contains really powerful antioxidants that are very soothing to your gastrointestinal system and nourish important bacteria in your microbiome. And then lastly, this whole bowl is built upon Nancy's organic yogurt, which contains a strain of bifidobacteria called Bifidobacterium BB12. And this particular bacteria actually triggers stronger intestinal contractions, which helps you to pass the stool more easily and have a bowel movement. So if you don't consume dairy, there is a non-dairy version called Cocoa June that also contains this strain BB12 that you can use instead. Okay, and then the next step is that you want to further enhance motility by using bitter foods or digestive bitters, which is a tincture, to trigger the bitter receptors on your tongue that tell your body to get ready for food. And so you would do this right away at the start of eating the constipation crushing motility bowl. You would essentially take either a tincture full of digestive bitters and put it in your mouth and taste it. Or you could eat some bitter foods. Coffee is a bitter food, so coffee would also count. You could have grapefruit. You could have a green like arugula or radicchio. But essentially what you're doing is you're activating the receptors on your tongue that trigger the release of hydrochloric acid in your stomach and digestive enzymes throughout your gastrointestinal tract. And this is going to help you to better digest your food, but it's also going to increase motility, and it's going to help you to have an easier time having a bowel movement. Then this last step is probably the most important. If you do not follow this step, you can actually completely halt digestion by causing a ton of inflammation that slows down peristalsis. And peristalsis is that contraction of the gastrointestinal wall, moving your food through your gastrointestinal tract. And so there are certain additives in our food, particularly and primarily in our processed foods, that are incredibly inflammatory for your gut lining. And the worst offenders are dietary emulsifiers. I want you to write this down because this is really important. I want you to start reading ingredient lists whenever you're picking up a packaged food product from the grocery store. And scan the ingredient list. And if it contains dietary emulsifiers, you want to put that product back. You want to look for an alternative to it. And the worst offenders are carboxymethylcellulose, polysorbate 80, and carrageenan. Now, they're not the only additives that are harmful to your gut. There are many others. I would recommend that if you don't recognize what an ingredient is, if it isn't a real food, that you find an alternative. An easy way to get around this is that any organic product is already going to eliminate these harmful additives because the standards are so strict. And so that's just an easy way to make this easier for yourself. The reality is if you're consuming these, they will trigger so much inflammation that it can halt peristalsis. And this one single strategy can be really impactful for resolving constipation. So let's say you put all of this together and you're doing this consistently. You need a way to monitor your progress, especially in the beginning when transit time might be improving by, an hour or two every couple days. And you aren't necessarily noticing the results in the toilet, but you're in that phase of like waiting for your system to respond. What you could do is, it's called a corn transit test. And essentially what you're doing is you're going to eat about 1/8 of a cup of corn. Try not to chew it because you don't want to digest it. And if you are able to kind of swallow it whole like you would a capsule, it's more likely it's going to end up being able to be seen in the toilet when you have a bowel movement. So write down the date and time that you ate the corn, and then write down when you see it show up in your stool. And the number of hours in between is your transit time. Try to do that once a week while you're implementing these strategies and see if your transit time is improving week to week. And so the goal is to get your transit time dialed in to around 24 hours. That's optimal. If your transit time is not improving and you're seeing no improvement, that's a clue that you need more support, that you're dealing with something deeper. Could be intestinal methanogen overgrowth, it could be SIBO. And my free constipation guide goes deeper into those root causes. So if you haven't checked that out, you can find the link below, take a look at that, and consider going a little deeper, trying to explore those other reasons. I hope you find this really helpful and that it gets things moving for you.